Kevin, I want to keep running leaf springs. Help me tune my leaf springs so that I can get my car down the track. Hey, welcome back to Kevin Wilson SBC. I'm excited today to talk more about leaf springs for drag racing part 2. Take a quick look at this screen and you can see the videos that have performed the best on my channel. Other than the 2 Pro Mod videos filmed many years ago when I used to go to the racetrack and do video for free and give the content to the track and the drivers, I love the sport that much. You can see the leaf spring video has been my #1 performing suspension video. So let's jump in and let's talk more about leaf springs for drag racing. Before we start, please remember to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for the support of my channel. Share the channel, do comments. I'm catching up on the comments. Guys, for the past 2 weeks, I've been sick with COVID and I got COVID pneumonia. I spent 3 days in ICU and I'm thankful to be back out of the hospital. I'm thankful for the doctors and the nurses, for the antibody treatments, the antiviral treatments. If you have more questions about that, please message me. I'll share with you my whole COVID experience. But anyways, forgive the mess behind me. We are still trying to recover from all of my time away, Christmas decorations. But let's jump in. Let's talk about leaf springs for drag racing. Let's build on the suspension videos. Let's keep educating the drag racing community. And let's talk more about that. In my original video, I tended to focus more on a split mono-leaf spring. Does that mean multi-leaf springs won't work? No, it doesn't mean that at all. Can you still run factory leaf springs and make a leaf spring rear end work? Absolutely. Let's talk about why I recommend split mono leaf springs. As you begin to purpose build a drag car and you begin to have weight reduction, you begin to change the height of your vehicle and make different things to lower the center of gravity. And as you begin to shed weight, you could benefit from a split mono-leaf spring because it's 2 separate springs that overlap under the rear end perch. And what you can do is you can have one spring rate on the rear and you can have a different spring rate on the front. Now, there's no magic here around why that's so much better, but it's more tuning, right? And you can get more creative. If you need a little tighter spring rate in the front, then so be it. If you take a look at this picture, yes, it's a picture I did so that no one can make copyright claims against me, but it's a hand-drawn picture I used to make in PowerPoint. And here you can see that I definitely recommend the split mono-leaf springs with the sliders. Now there's a couple things about this picture that's really important. And I failed to cover this in the first part video. If you look at, and just remember, this drawing is not to scale, guys. You can pick this drawing apart. This is for illustration purposes only. But if you take a look at this and you look at the imaginary line through the front spring perch and the rear spring perch, there's an angle on that perch. And when you install sliders on your leaf spring, you want the angle of the slider to be in line with the imaginary line we're seeing here. And the reason why I recommend the sliders is you're trying to free the suspension up, right? A leaf spring rear end with Calvert or Smith Assassin bars or ladder bars, it's going to more than likely plant the tire with rear separation. What's important about that though is the front mount point of your leaf spring. If that front mount point of your leaf spring is above the neutral line, and what I mean by neutral line is from the same neutral line we talk about with 4-link suspension, if that front spring perch is higher than the neutral line, you're going to have more separation on the leaf spring rear end. If you lower the front mount point of a leaf spring perch, you're going to have less separation. Are you going to introduce squat? You can probably introduce squat at some point, but I'm just saying up means more rear separation. You're going to plant the tire harder. you're going to hit the sidewall harder. Lower front spring perch mount, you're going to soften the separation. You're not going to hit the sidewall as hard. Now, stay tuned because I want to show you a product that is really cool for those of you who want to stay leaf spring rear suspension. You have lots of options out there to tune the placement of your leaf spring suspension. Now, with the split mono leafs, you can do different weights on the front spring and the back spring. We're looking at the slider. We want the slider in line so that as the rear end separates, the rear spring can slide forward, allow the tire to be planted. And the goal of that is at stock, not stock, but when you are sitting at ride height, race ready, notice in the slider, you want to be towards the back half of the slider. Because once the rear spring perch maxes out against the slider, then you're out of spring travel. And when you're out of spring travel, you're out of separation. Now, there's a limit, of course, right? I mean, there's a limit to everything we're talking about here. But you don't want your car at ride height to be in the middle of the slider or forward of middle. I would shoot for 65 to 70% back in the slider so that you have room for the rear shackle to slide. Now, on these leaf springs, I'm not really concerned with rubber bushings. I'm beyond that. If you're running leaf springs for drag racing or no prep, then I'm looking for solid mounts here. I'm not worried about road noise. I'm not worried about vibrations per se. I'm looking for a free moving suspension, Delron, bushings, aluminum, whatever. But I'm not looking for rubber bushings that are going to be binding and work against the movement of the leaf spring in the slider. So one thing that's really important is making sure you understand these angles as we look at this picture, okay? That's critical. Now, the number one enemy of leaf springs is axle wraps. My very first street car that I drag raced had leaf springs. If you take a look at this picture, this is the enemy of a leaf spring rear end. We're trying to eliminate this axle wrap because all we're doing now is introducing a bunch of wheel hop and wasted motion in the leaf spring. So this is where the Calvert bars, the Smith Assassin bars, this is where they do their magic. And they are going to allow you to take the twisting motion of the rear end and transfer that energy through the bracket, through the bar, and through the cantilever to keep the leaf spring from wrapping, and you're directing the energy through the chassis and driving the car forward. Now, what's driving the car forward is the front spring perch. If you're not running ladder bars, then that front spring perch is what's pushing your car forward. And these bars is what's allowing you to do that. It's very simple. The more uphill angle from the rear end to the chassis these bars have, the more bite it's going to add to the slick. As you lower the bar down, it's going to take away a little bit of bite. Now guys, more is not always better. We're talking about mostly small tire cars here, and you can really crush the sidewall of a small tire slick pretty quick. So you got to have balance. You can't just go, hey, I'm going to have all the separation I can get, and even on a no prep track, you're going to kill the slick, you're going to kill the sidewall, and it's going to unload. There's a balance between planning the sidewall of a slick and not overrunning the slick. And there's no magic formula here. Controlling the front end rise, keeping a very slow front end rise, and keeping the front end coming up through the first 100 to 150 foot is so critical. If your front end comes up too fast, leaf springs, 4-link, I don't care what kind of rear end you're running, it's going to come up, top out, and there's only one place for the weight to go, and that's back down on the front end. And when the weight comes back down on the front end, weight is coming off of the rear end, and eventually you're going to unload the tires. You're going to upset the chassis. Now, So it's important to understand this is what these bars are doing. Let's stop for a minute and talk about Calvert, Smith & Wesson bars or ladder bars. Let's talk about that real quick. Now, why might I recommend a ladder bar? Well, it's pretty simple, guys. With a ladder bar, I can probably get the chassis mount point a little further forward than I can with just a traditional leaf spring. If you notice, the rear end doesn't necessarily sit in the middle of the leaf spring. The rear end sits a little forward on a leaf spring. The super stock springs were so popular and still are because they took advantage of the position of the rear end on the leaf spring. And by having a little shorter front leaf spring, you had a stronger leaf spring which resisted axle wrap. And it was very effective. So, however, with the leaf spring setup, it's kind of difficult to tune the chassis mount point. So a lot of times what we've done is we've taken leaf spring cars that have gotten up in power, more in power, and people are having a lot of problem with crushing their slicks and crushing the sidewall. Yes, like I said, you can have too much rear separation. But by going with a ladder bar, I could extend the chassis mount point further up the chassis and calm down some of the rear separation. Yes, a ladder bar absolutely plants a tire. You can listen to Big Chief on some of his most recent videos talk about his experience with ladder bars and how well they worked, especially on the street and the no prep. And listen, the ladder bars absolutely work, but they are going to create separation too. A ladder bar traditionally 32, 38 inches long. And you normally have 3 to 5 chassis mount points on that front mount point. Generally on a no prep, on a street, whatever, you're kind of shooting for some of the lower holes. Remember, we're trying to introduce weight transfer to the rear of the car. And even in the lower holes, the rear end is still going to separate with a ladder bar because of how far behind the center of gravity you are. And you're probably going to be a little closer to 100% of the neutral line in your lower bars if the chassis mount points have been welded correctly in relation to the rear end mount points. I have seen chassis that have had chassis mount points 4 and 5 inches lower than the rear end, and that creates some very weird geometry. So hopefully whoever fabricated your chassis for the ladder bars got at least your number 2 or number 3 hole level with the rear end. And then you have a couple holes where you can take the chassis mount point up. You have a couple holes where you can bring the chassis mount point down. And of course, your shock valving is critical to controlling leaf springs with or without ladder bars. The extension valving is going to be critical in not overrunning the sidewall of the slick. Your compression valving is going to help maintain traction and keep the tire planted as well. It's just a fine line. So why might we run ladder bars? To move the chassis mount point out, to calm down some of the rear separation, to help introduce more front end lift, get more weight over the rear, because with a longer mount point, I'm able to apply more leverage to the front of the vehicle and move the weight to the rear of the vehicle. So that's why you might run a ladder bar setup over a Calvert or Smith & Wesson bar. One's not necessarily better than the other. It's going to be up to your car, your wheelbase, your weight. Is your car 50-50? Is it 55% on the nose, 45% on the rear? You have to evaluate your car and understand that. The purpose of the leaf springs is to support the weight of the vehicle. And I'm usually going to err on a softer weighted leaf spring than a heavier weighted leaf spring. I want the suspension to move freely. I want it to work. And I want to control that movement with my shock valving. Hopefully that helps explain a little bit more about ladder bars in Calvert or Smith & Wesson bars. Okay, let's talk about a few more things critical with leaf springs. Another critical aspect of a leaf spring rear end is pinion angle. Now, generally on a 4-link full drag race suspension, solid mounts, no rubber anywhere, we shoot for 2 and 2.5 degrees of downward pinion angle. I'm not going to get into working angles and all that. What I'm telling you is, if you look at the angle of the drive shaft in relation to the angle of the yoke, I'm looking for a little bit of a V around 2 to 2.5 degrees, so that on the hit, when the axle wraps, I'm trying to get the drive shaft and the yoke all the way to the transmission in a straight line, so that the drive shaft yokes are spinning and I'm not losing motion with bends in my U-joints. So with a leaf spring rear end though, we normally run more pinion angle. It's not uncommon for us to have leaf spring cars set up with 4.5 degrees. Here again, your car will dictate what it's looking for. Once you have your pinion angle set, once that axle wraps and the ring gear and the pinion begin to climb and that rear end begin to twist, you will know, and you should know, and you should be studying this with video. You can put a GoPro under your car. I've done it. I've seen a lot of people who do it, and you can see what's going on with your pinion angle. I'm just saying, generally, on a leaf spring car with a Smith Assassins or Calvert bars, you're generally going to run a little more pinion angle than you would. Now, back in the day, a leaf spring would really wrap, and we would have to limit with a snubber or some type of device to limit the amount of pinion wrap. And I mean, back then it wasn't uncommon to run 5 to 5.5 degrees of pinion angle because of how much the leaf springs worked and how hard they planted the tire. So pinion angle with a leaf spring car, generally we're going to introduce a little more pinion angle than we would with a solid mount 4-link rear end. Now, when you introduce ladder bars on a 4-link, on a leaf spring suspension, you can start toning down some of that pinion angle back to the 2.5, maybe 3 degree area. So hopefully that helps you. Okay, let me share something with you, a very cool product. I have talked about Tin Soldiers race cars before. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, shape, or form. I'm just amazed by their workmanship. I'm impressed by their quality of work. Everything is made in America. I love America and I want to support Made in America. These guys do a great job. They have some very cool leaf spring type stuff. Check out some of these pictures. They make things for leaf springs where you can install these on your chassis and you can custom mount and have options of where you put the leaf spring perch in the rear and where you position the front perch in the front. Remember, we talked about on a leaf spring car, the higher the front mount, the more you're going to hit the tire. The lower the front mount, the more you're going to soften the hit on the tire. Now, check this out, guys. These are very well made, very cool. You can, yes, they require fabrication, but they give you the front and rear mount points with adjustments. They can talk with you about your leaf springs. They can talk to you about your weight and your needs. I highly recommend you talk to these guys. Now, one more thing. Let's talk about leaf springs with the hangers in the back. I want you to take a look at this drawing. And yes, I prefer sliders, but not everybody can put sliders on their leaf spring car. So if you're still running a hanger on the back, remember how we talked about with the slider, you want to be towards the back half of the slider at right height so that you have room for the leaf spring to slide forward in the slider and allow the suspension to work. Well, if you're running hangers, first of all, get rid of all the rubber. I want the hanger mounted with good aluminum or Delron bushings. I want the hanger to be free. I don't want the hanger hard to move or twisting on rubber. I want it to just be solid mounted. I don't want any play in it, but I want it to move front and rear with freedom. I don't want it bound up. And at right height, I want the rear hanger hanging towards the back of the car. Straight up and down would be 90 degrees, right? So let's say we want to cheat back 15 to 20 degrees, because on the hit, the hanger is going to allow the leaf spring to move forward. And once the hanger comes in line with the imaginary line, guess what, guys? There's no more spring travel. The hanger can't go forward anymore. It's physics. So at ride height, if your hanger is already pointing forward, you're losing some suspension movement. Get the hanger so that it is pointing towards the back of the car. I'm not going to sit here and tell you 7 degrees more, 10 degrees more, but I want it back more. So let's say if it were me, I'd probably go 15 degrees back, because I want the hanger to be able to freely move and allow that spring to separate and plant the rear tire. Hopefully that drawing helps as well. Hey, thank you for watching. I hope I was able to add a little more value to the leaf spring for drag racing setup. Here again, it's not rocket science. I understand some of this is repetitive, but hey, I just want to say, for the leaf spring guys out there, kudos to you. Man, they work. You look at Billy the Kid on Street Racing Channel, that truck. Guys, there's no magic going on there. It just works. And yes, I have more experience with Calvert than I do Smith Assassin, but I'm not tied to any of it. It's really the same technology in controlling the leaf spring wrap, not allowing the leaf spring to distort, running split mono leaf so that as your power increases, you can have a little stronger spring rate on the front versus the rear. You can keep the rear spring a little softer, support the weight of the car, but have a little stronger front half spring to control wrap and get more energy into the chassis. Pinion angle, you're going to run a little more pinion angle with a leaf spring setup. Yes, you can run ladder bars, and we generally go to ladder bars when we need to calm down how hard we're hitting the tire. I've never ever set up a 4-link car with leaf springs, but I mean, I don't see why you couldn't. But traditionally with most leaf spring cars, when guys feel like they need more control, they generally go to a ladder bar 32 to 38 inches long to get that a little further up in the chassis point. And remember, for the street and no prep, you don't want to be in the very top hole. You're kind of looking for a level ladder bar, or maybe one hole down. Remember, we're trying to get the weight of the front end up, get the weight over the rear of the car, and keep the rear end planted all the way through the run. Yes, ladder bars absolutely work for no prep. They work great on the street. Generally though, on a prep track, and with the technology and the horsepower and torque today, a ladder bar on a fully prepped track is going to be pretty violent. And that's where the 4-link comes in, so that you can get a little longer instant center, change the height. And as you get into a big tire car, then you really are trying to introduce less anti-squat. I really shoot for the neutral line, or I shoot for 90% anti-squat. A big tire slick car, I'd love to sit here and tell you you can put all the anti-squat in it, but we all know you can't. You have to respect the big sidewall of a big tire slick, and you're trying to not kill the sidewall of a slick. So you're introducing a little bit of squat to get the weight over the car and get the car moving forward with some control wheel speed on a big tire. But having said that, ladder bars absolutely work. Small tires, prep tracks, they work. But as you get more and more prepped, you're going to have to think about lowering that front mount point to control the hit on the car. And that's important. Okay, guys, leaf springs for drag racing. Thank you for taking a minute to listen to this. I hope it makes sense. Check out Tin Soldier Race Cars. Check out their products. Let's talk more about leaf springs if you want to, but we're going to have more suspension videos coming. I'm getting lots of requests for, more F-body videos, more Gen 3 Camaro videos, and I'm going to try to keep the content coming. You guys subscribed, hit the bell icon. Thank you for supporting the channel. We are making progress on the Studebaker, where Dad's been doing a lot of welding on the front mount plates. We got the rear mid plate in. We've got the Power Glide. We're going to be building headers here soon. I'm waiting on the rear brakes to come in from Strange. I got the rear center section on order. We are going with a 457 rear gear. Remember, we have the Power Glide with the 169 first gear. So the blower motor is going to have a much better gearing than what it had in the 48. So we're excited about getting these products in. Everything is delayed on shipping right now. We're at the mercy of Strange Engineering for the center section and the rear 40 spline axles and the rear low profile brake kit. Remember, I'm running 15-inch bead locks, and most calipers do not clear full double bead lock wheels for 15-inch. Had I looked back on that, I should have went with a 16-inch wheel to have more clearance. But thank goodness Strange Engineering makes a low profile caliper option that we do have on the 48 Ford right now. So I know it will clear the rear end on the Studebaker. Unfortunately, the rear end on the Studebaker, it's the big Ford bearing old, and the rear end in the 48 is the big Ford bearing new. So I had to get, a whole new brake kit because of the mounting point differences. But we are making good progress. We are slowed down a little bit. I am going to be completely rewiring the Studebaker. I will have the Fuel Tech computer on it. It will stay 871 blown methanol. We are going to give it more boost. I'm shooting for 27 pounds, 28 pounds of boost. Before, the 48 was 21, 22 pounds of boost. So we're excited about that. I would love some comments back, guys. What do y'all recommend for electronics as far as switch panels? I'd like to do a cleaner wiring job, but I'd like to have a professional switch panel. I'd like to have a little relay panel that has the relays already installed and not homegrown by me. Wiring is not my forte. I can do it, but I would really rather buy some good wiring products, some maybe distribution panels. What do you guys recommend that I should use for the wiring in the Studebaker? What switch panels should I use? Should I look at Leash Electronics and get one of their relay boards? Guys, give me some feedback. I would love to hear your thoughts on this so that I can not make stupid mistakes on wiring the Studebaker. Look forward to it, guys. Thank you for all of your support. Have a good day, and remember, we're trying to do three things. We're trying to go fast, we're trying to go straight, and we're trying to be safe.